In this video you will learn why do you need NgRx inside Angular and how you can bind it to your Angular application. And the first and most important question here is, what is NgRx? And as you can see here, I opened official NgRx website, but from my point of view it is not exactly clear here why do we need NgRx at all and what problem it solves. So to understand why do you need NgRx, you must understand the concept of Redux. And actually Redux means that this is a state management for a single flow of data. So we have our state, then our component can dispatch an action, then our action can change our state, and all our components are subscribed to our state to apply some changes to our components. If you don't know and understand Redux, it doesn't make any sense for you to watch this video. To master NgRx, you first need to understand the concepts of Redux. And actually NgRx is simply an implementation of Redux inside Angular. So what do we typically want to do with NgRx? First of all, we have a global state, we can apply some changes to this state, and all our data is in a single place. And secondly, we have a possibility to make some asynchronous things, for example, like HTTP calls to our API by using effects, and we will talk about effects a little bit later. And the question that I'm getting from my students really often, okay, why do I need NgRx and why it is that popular if I can simply use an Angular service, call it inside component, and I'm totally fine. And this approach is not shareable at all. We're not talking here about state management, you are just saying about fetching some data and rendering them inside component. If you have lots of components and modules and you have a huge application, you need something for state management. You need some rules how people must work with your state. This is why Redux and NgRx are so popular, and I never saw a company who are doing Angular, for example, without usage of NgRx. So enough talking, let's start implementation. So our goal is, on the simple example, to bind NgRx to an Angular project and see how it works. And first of all, we must install several packages. And here, as you can see on the left, we have a lot of packages. We just need 3 of them. First of all, NgRx store. This is a main package. It brings NgRx inside your application. The second is developer tools. And actually here, NgRx store developer tools is exactly standard Redux developer tools for NgRx. And actually, from my perspective, this is the best tool to debug any application without digging in the code. And the last thing that we need here is NgRx effects, because we want to write some asynchronous code. So let's jump here inside console, and I have here a generated Angular application. So first of all, I will write here yarn add NgRx / and we have here store. The next package that I want to install is NgRx effects. And the last package here is yarn add NgRx store DevTools. Now let's look on our project. As you can see here inside app, I have a new module which is called post. And the main idea that here inside component, we will render a list of posts. Here I just have h1 and inside posts I don't have anything. But also here I generated a service, post service, where we're getting a list of our posts. And it is simply ID and title, and here we're getting it as a stream with delay 2 seconds, just like we're getting our data from the API. And here I also generated post interface, which is just an interface for our posts. So now it is time to bind NgRx store to our application. And for this we must jump inside app module, and here inside imports we want to write store module .for root, and we're just providing inside an empty object. And actually this will instantiate NgRx inside our application. But as you can see, we are not providing anything here inside, because we want to define all our reducers and all our stuff which is related to specific module inside that module. This is why here we won't have anything. And after this, it is really important to bind NgRx store DevTools. Here inside overview, you can see the implementation. We can simply copy-paste these lines from here, store DevTools module instrument, and paste it inside our app module. And what this line is doing, it will instantiate our Redux DevTools. And here maximum we can see 25 lines, we will have log only on production, and here after pause is true when our DevTools is not opened. Now we can open our application in browser, and here I have a tab, Redux. If you don't have this tab, you must just jump inside Google and type Redux DevTools. This is the standard DevTools of the Redux, and you will get this nice tool. And actually we see here all this stuff, which actually means we don't have any state, but we already created our Redux DevTools and successfully bind it to our application with just this line. Our next step will be to create a state for our posts. So actually posts is our module where we want to work with posts. We can say that this is a single page, for example. And here inside our posts, inside types, I want to create a post state interface TS. So the main idea is that inside Redux we have just a single global object, and we somehow want to have slices inside this object. And actually inside every single module, for example inside posts, we can create a slice. And actually this slice is exactly post state. And here inside we will have all our properties which are related to this specific module. And the main idea is that we don't have local properties just across all possible components. We have a global state, and we can see the whole state from any place. This is why here what we can write is a new interface, which is our post state interface. And actually this is our Redux interface for this specific module. And here typically you want, for example, is loading, which will be Boolean, because we need to fetch some data inside our post, which actually means we want to show a loading indicator. This is why here I will create is loading, and we can set it to true when we start loading of our data. After this here we will store our post, which is actually a post interface array. And the last one here will be our error, which can be, for example, a string or null, and by default it will be obviously null, and if we get some error from the backend, we can just save it here and then render inside a component. Our next step here is to create actions. So what are actions? These are user events which can change these properties inside our state. This is why here inside post I want to create a new folder which is called store, and here we will store everything which is related to NgRx. And here I just want to create a single file actions.ts, and inside we can create a new function, for example get posts. And here we're saying create action, and actually create action is a function from NgRx store, and here inside we can simply provide a string. And actually here typically you will see such notation. Here we have posts in square brackets, and after this get posts. What does it mean? Here actually it can be any string, but all these strings and all the sections are global because Redux state is global. This is why here people typically want to namespace all the sections with some module name. And in our case we're talking about module posts. This is why here we have a namespace posts. And here after this we have a name of our action, which is just a string, which actually means this single line creates for us an action, just like we're doing inside Redux, store, dispatch, and there we're providing an action. So our action is ready, now we must create a reducer. This is why here I will create a new file, reducers.ts. So here we need two things. First of all, we must create our initial state. And initial state is the initial state of our module. And here we can write our post state interface that we just created. As you can see here, we directly get an error that our object is missing following properties: is loading, posts, and error. This is why here we must set our is loading, and by default the state is false. After this we have our post, and by default we don't have any posts, which means it is an empty array. And last one is our error. By default we have no errors, so it is null. And with that our initial state is ready. Now we must create a reducer which will change our state with the actions. And here we can simply write export const reducers. And here we're using function create reducer, which is also coming from NgRx store. And inside, first of all, we must provide our initial state, and secondly, our changes. And every single change we are writing with the function on. So here we can say on, for example, get posts, then on get post success, and so on. In our case here, we must import all our actions. And typically we are importing it like this. So import star as posts actions from, and here is our file actions, which actually means we're taking all our export const here, and we can have like 10 or 20 of our different actions, and we're grouping them in this single object. And now here inside on we can simply write posts actions dot get post. and this is exactly on what we want to react. And the second parameter here is a function where we're getting access to our state. And what we want to do inside, we want to return a new state. This is why here I will spread our state and change its loading property to true, because this is the start of our getting post, and here we want to show the spinner that we are loading something. So this is how we typically write our code. Inside create reducer we are passing initial state, and then we will have lots of ons. And here we are saying, okay, when our action get post is happening, here what we want to do and how we need to change our state. So here we are describing all changes to our state. And here, as you can see, we have access to our state. This is exactly this state. And here we just want to update our isLoading to true. And the last thing that we need to do here, we must inject our store module inside our post module. This is why here inside imports, I want to write store module dot, and here we're using not for root but for feature. And inside we can provide a feature name. And we're writing here post module, which means here we can write that this is a post string. And now here we must import our reducers. And actually we have our reducers from store reducers. So what this line is doing, it will create for us a new slice of these reducers inside our state. Let's check this out. As you can see, I don't have any errors. I will jump here inside browser, and here is my state. So here inside Redux DevTools directly I see the global Redux state. And as you can see here we have a post, which is just our slice that we created. And here inside we have isLoading, post and error. This is our initial state. This is because of the single liner where inside we put our reducers. And our reducers here is saying that this is our initial state. But now the most interesting part, we want to change our state. This is why what I want to do here inside our components post component, I want to dispatch this get post. This is why here what we can do, first of all, implements on init. So we want to do something on initialize. Here is our ng on init, and we must inside constructor inject store. And actually this store is our store from NgRx. And we must inject here this store to write store dispatch. This is why here now we can write this store.dispatch, and here inside we must provide an action. And typically you will write it exactly like we did it inside reducer, import star as, and here we have our post action from, and here we want to jump inside our store actions. And now here inside our this store dispatch we are providing post actions dot get post and round brackets. So inside plain Redux you typically write store dispatch and your action. This is exactly this. Here we have store, which we are injecting through NgRx, and we are dispatching our action. So on initialize of our component now, as you can see, we are getting get post, which actually means we want to fetch some data. And actually here inside state you can see that our isLoading is in true, which actually means this specific action changed our state. And here we can click on the diff tab, and we see that our isLoading was changed from false to true because of this action. Which means it is really easy to debug. You can simply open Redux DevTools, you see the list of the sections, you can simply click between them, and you can see every single action and how it changes your global state. You don't need to console log any properties, the whole state of your application is just for you here on the glance. So this is the basics of using NgRx. You are creating reducer for your specific module, and you are creating actions that can change state. Now the question is obviously how we can use this state inside our component and how we can render, for example, this loading state. This is why here we must use selectors. And if you remember what are selectors from Redux, this is the way how we can select some properties from our state. And we have something similar inside NgRx. This is why here inside our store, I want to create the file which is selectors.ts. And here we want to create selectors for different properties of our state. And actually, first of all, here we want to select our feature. This is why here we can write a function select feature. And here we simply get the global state of our application. And typically we'll have here app state interface. And then after this, we want to return state.post. So what this line is doing at all? Actually here we will have like hundreds of different properties, because you can have hundreds of modules, like maybe posts, authentication, users, whatever you prefer. And actually here we want to get just this slice of posts, because only this single slice is related to our page. Actually you could get any slice, but for now we're interested in this specific slice. This is why here this select feature is just selects a single feature state.post. So now let's talk about this app state interface. What is this? This is our global state. This is the whole representation of the state inside your application. This is a single point of truth. And what we can do here inside our app, we can create new folder types, and inside we can create our app state interface TS. And this is exactly the place where we will create this interface and where inside everything will be situated. So here we can just export this interface, app state interface. And what we have inside, just a single property post, which is our post state interface. We already created that. And actually now any developer can just jump inside our application, open this single file and see the whole global state of our application. And now he can just say, okay, I am interested in this post state interface, and he is opening it and he sees all these properties. And now we can jump back inside the selectors and import here this app state interface on the top. So here app state interface from source app types app state interface. And actually here we're getting nice autocomplete, and we know that we're totally right, we have a slice post. And actually this is just a helper to get a specific field from our slice. This is why here now, let's say that we want to get isLoading. This is why here we can create isLoading selector. And for this we're using create selector function. And this function is also coming from NgRx store. And what we want to write inside this select feature that we just created on the top. And secondly, we will have a function. And here we're getting our state, and as you can see here, state dot is our slice. We have here access to three properties, isLoading, error, and post. And here I just want to return our state isLoading, which actually means this line creates for us a selector that we can reuse, and it is a stream which will deliver for us our data. This is why I want to copy this isLoading selector and use inside our component. And here inside our post component TS, inside our constructor, we can use this selector. And for this we can write this store select pipe. And inside we're providing select function, and it is from NgRx store. And inside we're writing isLoading selector, which actually means this line selects for us isLoading selector property from our state. And now here we must assign it, because this is a stream. We can save it inside this isLoading with $, for example. And here we must create this stream. This is isLoading, which is an observable of Boolean, because we know isLoading is a Boolean. But as you can see here, we're getting an error from TypeScript. Here it is written that type observable object is not assignable to type observable app state interface. And the problem is here that we didn't specify inside our store what state we have. And here inside store we can actually say app state interface. And in this case we won't get any error, because by default inside the store the state is simply an empty object. It is not suitable for us. This is why here we are saying, okay, this is our global state. This is why isLoading in this case is just a stream. And now this single line will return for us data from our state. This is why here I can jump inside HTML and just use this stream. So here we have div with text loading, and here I can write ngIf condition. So ngIf, and here we're using our isLoading stream with $, and we're using here async pipe. Because we're using async pipe, we don't need some subscribes, we don't need unsubscribes. Now I can jump inside browser and reload the page, and as you can see here, we directly see this div loading. Why do we see it? Because actually inside our application, inside Redux, inside our state, this property isLoading is set to true now. And when it will be changed to false, then our component will be rendered directly. And now we must talk about asynchronous data and asynchronous effects, because now you already know everything about dispatching, reducers, actions, but obviously you want to get some data from the backend, which means you have some long asynchronous operation. And this is exactly what we have here inside our service post service, because here we have a delay. So how it works inside NgRx, exactly like inside Redux, for example with Redux Thunk, we're just dispatching an action at the beginning of the fetch, and then we dispatch an action at the end of the fetch. This is it. And this is what we need to implement. First of all, we want to jump inside our store actions and create here 2 additional actions. This is why here I will copy-paste get post twice, because here we want get post success and get post failure. Because for asynchronous code, we need start, success, and failure. So here will be get post success, and here will be get post failure. And now here we can change the name to get post success and get post failure. But it is not all, because actually here we want to provide some data. Here we are getting something from the backend, and we need to notify about this data inside our state. This is why here as a second parameter we can provide props. And as you can see, we can auto import props here, and inside we must say what data we will get back. And typically we will write here an object with field, for example, post, and here post interface array. Why like this? Because actually from our API we will get a list of posts as an array. And now here we have a failure. We also want to get an error from our backend. This is why here we will also write that we have props, and inside here we can write that we have an error. This is why here will be an object, error field, and it is a string. So this is how you typically create actions with some parameters. And now we want to change our reducer. So we must jump here inside reducers, and here we have on reaction. But now we also want to apply it to success and failure. This is why I will copy paste it twice, put here commas, and now let's change it to get post success and get post failure. Now what we want to change in our success, first of all, is loading must be set to false, and secondly we are getting here our posts, and actually we are getting them inside our action, and this is the second parameter of this function, so we are getting here state and action. And what I want to write here is posts, which are equal to action dot, and here I am getting posts, which actually means we are dispatching the action with posts inside, and here we are updating our state with this post. And exactly the same we are getting inside failure. Here we have access to our action, and this loading must be set to false, and we want to write an error inside, and it is action.error. And I am sure now that if you don't know NgRx, this code is really overwhelming for you. But actually it is always the same. You always create actions, reducers, selectors, and they are all looking the same. This is why you simply need to implement it like 5 or 10 times, and then you are good to go. So we successfully updated our actions and reducers, now we must update our selectors. So here we already have isLoading selector, and I can copy paste it twice and change first of all because we want to get here our post selector, and here we can simply get from our state.post, and last one here will be our error selector, and here we want to get from the state.error. So now everything is prepared and we must start talking about effects. So what are effects? This is the possibility to make an asynchronous calls inside NgRx. This is why here inside store I want to create one more file which is called effects.ts, and inside we want to create an effect. And actually we are creating it inside a class. This is why here we can create post effects, and on the top we should not forget injectable. Now here inside we want to create, for example, get post, and the name here doesn't matter, and it equals our create effect function, and inside we must pass a function. And now here it will be difficult, because actually inside effect, because they are written with Redux.js, it is really easy to make a mistake because we have just a lot of brackets and indentation. So what we are doing inside create effect is we are returning this dot $actions, and we don't have here $actions. This is why we must inject it here. This is why here we have constructor and we're injecting our actions with $, and it is actions which we are getting from NgRx effects. And after this we can write this dot, and we have access to actions, and this is a stream. And after this we are writing pipe with of type inside. And actually we're using here of type because we want to react on the specific action. This is why here on the top we must import our actions, and this is import star as our post actions from, and here are our actions. Now inside of type we can provide post actions dot get post, which actually means this effect will take place only when our get post actions is happening. And now after of type we want to write merge map, and inside merge map here we want to return a function. And what we want to return here is a call for our service. This is why here we must inject our service. So it will be private post service, and it is our post service. Now here inside merge map we can use this post service. So this dot post service dot get post, and this is a stream and we must react for it. This is why here we can again write pipe, and inside we have a map. And here we're getting access to our posts, and we want to dispatch a new action. It will be post action dot get post success, and we're providing inside our post. And actually here we should not forget our brackets, because we're providing inside an object and not just an array of posts. So this code might be really scary for you, but this is the same code that we're writing again and again inside effects. We simply create here an effect, and here we always write this actions pipe of type, and here we have some action. In our case this is the starting action get post, and inside here we have a merge map, and we want to return here a stream. This is why here we are calling this post service get post, and this is actually a stream which is returning for us data from API. And here we want to react to this stream accordingly. This is why we are mapping here our stream, and we want to dispatch an action success. The main point is that we are not writing here this store dispatch, but we can simply return our action and it will be dispatched accordingly. And now after our map we can write here catch error, and inside catch error we are getting an error, and we want to return a stream again. This is why here will be off, and inside we are pasting post actions dot get post failure, and we're providing inside our error. And here is an object with an error, which is actually error.message, which actually means we have here success and failure. So here we have a stream with map with success, and here is catch error with error, and here when it is failing we're calling get post failure. And actually this code of effect you will copy paste 99% exactly the same to every single file. So our post effect is ready. Now we must register it inside our post module. This is why inside post module here after store module we can register it with effects module dot, and here we have for feature, and inside we are providing an array. And here what we can write is our post effects that we just created. And we should not forget to register effects module inside root. This is why we are jumping inside app module, and here after store module, for example, we can write effects module dot for root, and this is it. We are not providing anything inside. Let's check this out. We don't have any errors here. Now let's reload our page. And this is how our Redux is looking like. We have here get post and get post success. How it happened? Actually we wrote inside our component just get post. This is what we can see here inside our post component, just this store dispatch. And actually this triggered our effect, and our effect called our service, which is an asynchronous call to our API. And after this call is ready, after 2 seconds, we are getting get post success because it is finished, and this is how we changed our state. So our isLoading is changed from true to false, and these are our posts. This is why now inside our state we have isLoading false. This is the list of the posts that we can use now, and this is the error, it is null, because we are not in failure. Now let's render this information inside our component. So here we need 2 more things. First of all, an error, which is a stream, and here is our observable of an error. This is string or null. And we also need here a stream for our post, which is an observable of our post interface array. And here inside constructor I can just copy paste isLoading twice and rename it first of all to the error and secondly to post. And here we can use another selector, it is our error selector, and here we will have our post selector. So this is how we are getting our data from the state, and now we can directly use these streams inside our HTML. So first of all let's render an error. We can simply write here ngIf we're getting here an error stream with a sync as error. In this case here, we're getting a local property error that we can directly render. And after this, we can render a list of our posts with just ng for loop. This is why here ng for, we're getting access to every single post of our stream post, which is a sync. And here inside, we can just render our post.title. Let's check if it's working. I will reload the page and we can see here loading for 2 seconds. And after this, we see our posts because they were fetched, put in state, and now our stream was changed and our component was re-rendered. So as you can see, when you are using NgRx code, you don't have any business logic inside your component. You simply have here dispatches and you have subscriptions to your state. This is why it is extremely efficient for big scalable applications. And actually, if you're interested to learn how to use animations inside Angular, make sure to check this video also.